Hey, what's up guys? In this video, we're going to cover setting up a boilerplate Express and Node.js backend runtime environment. In this environment, we're going to configure security related stuff, database related stuff, passport related stuff. We're going to cover routing, middleware, schemas, basically all the basic stuff that you would need in your project to get started as a full stack developer. But in this video, we're going to focus on the backend runtime environment. So we're going to focus on Express and Node.js. In this video, we're going to cover everything that you need to get started. So let's jump in. Okay, so now I'm in my terminal of choice. I am in iTerm, as you can see in the top left corner on Mac OS. But you can use any emulator or terminal, such as this terminal. But I use iTerm because it's just better, and for my specific preference. Okay, so we're going to make directory. And we're going to call this Express boilerplate. And then I'm going to ls to make sure that was created. And as we can see right here, it's right there. It is created. So we're going to cd into Express, change directories into Express boilerplate. And we're going to mkdir, again, make directory for the server. And we're not going to worry about the client for now. But if you're using like React.js, you do npx create React app client. And that's how you would do that. Or if you're using React Native, npx React Native init client, I think, something like that. But it's I forgot the exact command. But we're not going to worry about the client. We're just going to worry about the server here. So we're going to cd into the server. And what we're going to do now is we're going to npm init. And what that's going to do is basically that's going to initialize the package JSON. The package JSON is what stores all of our dependencies, and it's a project management for the dependencies essentially. So I'm going to continue on, and then at the entry point, just type in server.js, and then just continue hitting enter for the rest of that. So now if we ls, we can actually see our package JSON there. I'll clear this and ls again. We see our package JSON. So we're going to touch creates a file. So we're going to touch server.js to create that server.js file that we just linked in the package JSON here. So there's our main entry file, the server.js right there. And so we need to touch or to create that file. Okay, we'll also need to create some folder and file to structure some underlying stuff, maintenance that we need to do. So we're going to mkdir routes, mkdir middleware, mkdir schemas, mkdir one more, it's just the last one, and it's the routes, middleware, schemas, and then mkdir strategies for our passport and stuff like that, and then mkdir config for our env configuration. So if we ls, we can see we have a whole project here ready to go, all the folder file structure. Now we need to fill these out and flush these out a bit. So first and foremost, though, we need to install npm install, and make sure you have Node installed on your system. If you do not have Node installed on your system, npm will not work. Node installs npm by proxy, so you'll get npm with Node.js when you install Node.js. So do that. I'm not going to bother with that in this video, but if you don't have that, install that. npm install, and what we're going to install here is we're going to install basically all the core dependencies that we may need. So cores, body, parser, config, XSS to prevent against XSS attacks. What else? NodeMon, concurrent. We also need obviously Express, and then just hit enter, and your dependencies will be installed. So now that we have our dependencies installed, we want to actually open up our code editor, and I'm going to use Visual Studio Code, but we need to configure configure the server essentially. And so we're going to work on that now. All right, let's go ahead and start importing our modules that we're going to use, our npm modules. So we're going to require or import Express from Express. And the way these requires work is basically you name your variable here, and there's like best naming conventions or there's best practices. So Express should always be Express, not EXP. but it would work if you use EXP. It's best to do Express so other developers know what that means. And then you're going to require your packages through this syntax right here. So you know how in React it's like import something from something identical to this. That's the same thing, it's just a different form. It's just you have to change the syntax on the back end versus the front end. All right, and now we need to const app equals express and call that express module to create our server. And then we need to allow it to use JSON, right? So we need it to basically, we need to use like the app use and then whatever we want to do with it, right? So in this instance, app use. So we're telling our Express server to use this Express JSON. And that's going to parse the JSON data for us. So it's legible and readable. And we're going to set up just a basic API route. So app get slash request response. And then we'll just console log this request. And then all we got to do now is basically set up the port, which actually I want to put the port at the top. I don't like the port being at the bottom. So let's do const. And I'm assuming you have basic JavaScript knowledge or programming knowledge with the let, const, var, etc. But basically const is a variable that cannot be renamed. It's a fixed variable, cannot be renamed. And so we're going to do const port in capital letters. And then we're going to assign that to 8,000 or whatever you want to use your port on. And then we need to basically do app listen. And what this is telling is app is express because it's assigned here. And then we're listening on port. And then we're going to do a callback. And then console log template literal. App is listening on port. And then insert a variable in the template literal port. Okay, so that's our basic configuration for the server. So now if we run this, we can open our terminal. I'm going to clear this out, and then if I print working directory, you can still I'm still in that same server directory here, as you can see. So if I run npm, let's cat the package JSON first, see what the command is. So there is no command yet. Notice in the package JSON there's no start script. So we need to actually do that first. So we'll go into the package JSON, and we're going to create two scripts. Dev, which is going to be the nodemon server.js. Nodemon is a npm package that we installed. You can see it right here. Nodemon basically reloads the server on the fly, and I'll show you that momentarily. But it reloads the server on the fly so that you don't have to manually reload it, essentially. And then we have start. We're going to create one more script, start, and this will just be node server.js, a normal runtime environment. So let's save that and go back to the terminal. And if I run npm run dev, we can see that we're running on port 8,000. So our app is listening. Now if I change something in my app, so notice this, if I change something in my app, if I just put a space and save, it automatically reloads and it does its thing again. So if I do that again, it does it again. Pretty cool. So it saves you from having to basically stop it, start it, stop it, start it, stop it, start it, so on and so forth. So now that we have our server running, let's configure the routes directory. And I'll explain each one of these as we go through them systematically. But so this route right here, we don't actually want all of our routes. Like imagine if we had all of these routes in our server file. A, that's dry, don't repeat yourself, DRY. And B, it looks like shit, you know? Like it just doesn't look concise, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look modular. It's not the way to do it. So we want a modular approach here. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a new folder in our routes. I'm going to name it test, or I'm going to name it auth, and we'll change this down the road. And I'm going to copy that, delete that, go into my auth, create a new file, and I'm going to create it, and I'm going to name it index.js. Well, I'll name it register.js. We're going to change this route later, but first things first, we need to import Express again. We're going to use this Express module quite a bit. And then we're going to take off the router from the Express module with a capital R for the router. And what that is that allows us to manage our routes and separate and modularize, if that's a word, modulate our basically our routes essentially, right? So we got our router here, and it's the same principle. Similarly, actually, it's like router get, and then that's similar to app get, and you'll see once we import it here into the server. But we also need to module exports and then that router. And so that's going to automatically, any route that hits this endpoint, right? We don't assign any endpoint here. We actually save that. We'll go into our server and we'll require, we got to use app use, and then the route name itself. So in this case, we're using register. So we'll do register, and then we need to import or require that module. So we'll go out a half a directory into the routes, because routes is right there in the same directory as our server. So we've got a half, one dot and a slash and a half, and then we'll go into auth, and then we'll go into the register.js, and that will import our route. That's what I was talking about. In this route, you don't want to do anything with this. The only thing that you're changing really in these is whether it's a post request, a put request, a get request, etc. Right? We're going to keep it as a get for now, which is fetching information. But yeah, so this is how you import your routes. So you would have a lot of routes like this. And we can even optimize this further, which I'll show you down the road. But that's much cleaner than what we had prior. Okay. And so now that we got that registered, let's set up our configuration. So our config needs a default JSON file. And what this default JSON file is basically a place to store all of our credentials, right? So anything that we're going to use that's sensitive, API keys, credentials, JSON Web Token secrets, anything like that is going to be in this file. So you need to create the open brackets, the curly open brackets, 2 of those, and your text editor should close it for you. But then you need a parentheses, and I'll do like Mongo URI, for instance, for MongoDB, because we're going to set up MongoDB here in a moment. And so you would just save that and put your string here, or API key, so on, so forth. I'll keep that one for right now to show you. So we installed that config module. This config right here is great. It's a perfect module for backend environmental variable storage instead of just the traditional env file. I don't like that. I'd rather have the default JSON file. So to show you a working example, now mind you, you need to, I'll console log this real quick, console log, and then I'll do config get, and then the variable name. So that's how you call the environmental variables. Obviously, we need to import that config. You don't need to do this. I'm just showing you an example. So we got the config package here, and then we log that. So we should see this. However, we're not going to see it because we must reload our server. Oh, I guess not. But sometimes you might need to reload your server when you update those environmental variables. But as you can see, we see the ASDF, which is right here. I didn't think NodeMon was capable of registering those new env variables, but apparently it is. So yeah, let's move on to MongoDB, and let's configure our database now. Now we're going to basically create the Mongo configuration. So we're going to create a file and name it MongoUtil, short for Mongo Utility. Okay. And what we're going to do here is we're going to basically import the Mongo client from MongoDB. And then we're going to bring in the config as well, require config. And then what else do we need to bring in? We need to bring in the URL, which is this URL right here, the Mongo URI. I'm going to assume you have a string to fill in here. I'll make a video on that later if you need assistance with that. But yeah, so we're just going to do config get and then Mongo URI. And lastly, Mongoose. We need to bring in Mongoose, but we haven't installed that. So we're going to save this, go out. We'll see that we need to install Mongoose. So stop the server, restart it, install Mongoose, and npm run dev to restart the server. And then now what we need to do is we're going to use a class and then connection and open this bracket. And then we're going to do basically a async open. Async await is basically a asynchronous way of allowing logic to run and to basically wait for the response and then proceed forward. It's a more optimized way of basically instead of waiting for something to process. Like holding up all the traffic basically, because JavaScript is line by line, so it's single threaded. So line. Oh shit! Okay, we stop here, and then wait. What the async does, we go line. Okay, whatever. Line, and then that processes. So that's kind of what async await is. And then to wait for the command, we would use await, but we're not going to use that yet. And then we're going to say if this DB exists, then return this DB. Otherwise, we want to await Mongoose, and I think it's connect. And then we want to use this URL right here, our Mongoose connection string, our Mongo connection string, and then new URL use new URL parser, I believe, to true. Okay, we're almost done with this file, so just bear with me, follow along. And well, this is like one of the more coding sections, the more like code intensive sections. So we're going to do this DB. So we're going to assign this DB to the Mongo client connect, and that's going to be this URL and then this options, and I'll explain that here in a moment. And then we just want to console log that this has been connected, and then I'm going to do a template literal here and inject this DB. Well, we'll do this separately. We'll just say this is connected. Don't worry about the template literal actually, because that's going to be returning an object, which is going to fail this DB. And lastly, we want to return this DB. And then down here, we're going to do connection. And then we're going to do DB equals null for default. Connection URL equals null, or equals URL, sorry. And then we're going to do connection options, and then an object, new URL parser to true, and use unified topology to true. And then lastly, we just need to export this. So module exports, and then break this open to connection. So we're just gonna, so that way if we add other stuff to this file, we can just export each one and call them like this. You bring them in like that versus that. Okay, we're gonna save this. We're gonna go to our server. We're gonna do the very top here. We're gonna const. I'll do connection MongoDB, and then we'll require. Well, actually, we need to pull off that connection. Sorry, we need to pull off. Where did it go? We need to pull off the connection. So get rid of that, and connection requires, and then Mongo util. And then all we got to do, I believe, is just connection open, I think. And let's see what that does. Open is not a function. Maybe just call connection. Let me see here. I think we're missing. Yeah, it's connection open. But I don't know why that's not working. Let's look at the Mongo util. Let's see what we're missing here. Oh, the await connection is open still. See, oh, that's what we're missing. We're missing the static function assignment here. So invalid schema, right? So I didn't link my MongoDB string. What that's saying, if you run into that error, is we need to put a valid string here. So for the sake of this video, I'm just going to copy a string from another project and just paste it in here, just so I can get this working and get it up and running. So you'll have to use your own string, obviously, but just paste your string in there, and then when you reload this, you will get, we need to capitalize that U and unified. So I'm going to get rid of this line right here. And we have our connection right here. So here's our MongoDB object. This is what we wanted. So now we can see that we have our connection, our client here, and then we have our port here. Now that MongoDB is knocked out, let's move on to the next section, which will be strategies. So we're going to create 2 to 3 files. We're going to create authentication.js, which will authenticate our users. We're going to create JWT strategy, and you can name these however you want, but just keep the same naming convention. So I'm using camel case here, but just use whatever naming convention you want to stick to. And that should do for now. And then we also need authentication. So authenticate and authentication are a bit different, and you'll see here in a little bit, but just create these files for the sake of the tutorial. So first and foremost, we're going to do authenticate. Now authenticate, same principle, we need to import some stuff, and then we're going to create a function that basically decodes a JSON Web Token or the bearer token, like BEARER, and then the token, right? It's going to decode that and then verify that the token's legitimate. So what we need to do first is we basically need to, import JSON Web Token. So require, and we're going to have to install this, but JSON Web Token. And I'm going to go ahead and install that now. So I'm going to stop server, npm install, paste that. Start the server back up. And then we want to import the config. We want to create the config for the JSON Web Token, because we're going to use a key for the JSON Web Token. And then we're going to create a function, authenticate token, and then we're going to use the arrow, the fat arrow for ES6, ECMAScript 6, which is the latest version of JavaScript. And we're just going to do console log authenticate to make sure that runs, and then module exports authenticate token. Okay, and now within this token, we want to, we'll actually reuse this log. So we want to create const auth header equals, and then this is going to be a route kind of similar to our routes here with the rec response, and then next. So I'll show you that. Rec response, and they have to go in this order. They cannot go in a different order. And then next. And then so what we're going to do here is we're actually going to take the rec headers and then authorization. Okay, and then we're going to take this and paste that in that second bracket so we can see that when that comes in. So that's basically checking the request headers and the authorization value, and then we'll log that. And then now we need to do something with that, basically, to make sure that our users are indeed authenticated. So the token is going to be basically auth header split, and then by the space, because you'll have in all the requests you'll have bearer and then token blah 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 whatever, right? Your token there. So what we want to do is we want to split that space right there. So that space right there, we want to split, and then we'll take the first element. So we'll do split, and then we don't want 0 because that'll give us bearer but we want rather the first element, because arrays start at 0. So the same principle with splitting. Okay, and then now we're going to do a try catch. This basically just tries this logic, and if not, it'll run this logic. So we want to console log that error if there is indeed an error, and then otherwise we want to do const decoded. This is this is going to be our decoded token, JSON web token, decode, and then token, and then config as a second argument, get, and then JWT secret. And that's why we imported the config at the top here, because we're going to create this now. So if we go into the default config, we're just going to paste this here and then create whatever key you want. It could be literally anything. You just want it to be long and like relatively difficult. So I'm also going to go through here and actually insert some upper, some lowercase, upper lowercase numbers. So upper lowercase characters, special numbers, whatever. Just make it complex and long. And then so we're going to do, where was that? So we have our token now that's decoded. And then what we want to do is we're going to do rec user equals decoded. So that's going to assign that to the user variable or value. And then we're going to do next. So it proceeds on. So basically, what we're doing here, let me clean this up a bit. All right. So what we're doing here is we're catching the auth header, the authorization value. We're taking that header, we're splitting it, we're taking the second value, the token itself that's still encrypted, and then we're going to decode that token through JSON Web Tokens, the JWT package or JSON Web Token. We're going to decode that token with this secret key, and then we're going to assign that to every rec user that is applied, and then continue on. So save that, and then now what we need to do is the JSON Web Token strategy. And this is going to be a little bit more complex, but it's important. So we're going to bring in Passport, require Passport. Now we need to install this. Passport is basically a way of authenticating users. It's a npm package as well. So just type Passport, install that. And let me bring that up for reference. So Passport is, let's see here, it's an Express compatible authentication middleware for Node.js. Its sole purpose is to authenticate requests, and basically, yeah, that's kind of it. So, and its plugins as strategies, which it does through an extensive set of plugins known as strategies. Hence why our folder is named strategies. Okay, so we brought in Passport. We need to also install Passport JWT. Sorry about that. npm install Passport JWT. And that should be the last package that we need to install for now. So npm run dev, swap back. So const capital J, WT, and then strategy require Passport JWT. And then we're going to pull off strategy off that package, that npm package. And then we're going to do extract JWT as well, and we're going to pull that also off of the JWT Passport package and extract JWT. And actually with this one we can just remove that and just put a bracket around that. And that's the equivalent of pulling off the value from that. Okay? So I guess theoretically we could do strategy here and just rename this as well. There we go. All right, and then we need to bring in const config because we're going to need that JSON Web Token secret down the road here, and const. Let's see here. We'll leave that off for now. So what we need to do is we need to create the default options and just assign that to an empty object. And then now we're going to assign JWT from request equals extract JWT from auth header as bearer token. And then opts or OPTS secret or key equals config get JSON web token secret, which is going to match this right here. I'm back in JWT strategy.js. We need to now utilize the passport. So we have all the configuration set up. We just got to utilize passport. So we're going to do passport use new strategy, which is the strategy that we imported right here. And then we're going to pass it the ops or the options right here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a callback and JWT payload, and then done. And then we're going to do a fat arrow, which is going to give us a function, ES6. And then what we're going to do is we're going to console log that payload, JWT payload. And then I'm just going to copy and paste that. And then what we want to do, any logic you want to do in here, you can do whatever you'd like in here. So I, for instance, have used this in another project. I would just find my user based on the ID of that payload. But you can do whatever you'd like. So I'm just going to get rid of that for now. So that's the basis of the passport authentication. So we have the authenticate token, which is going to basically protect our API routes, which we'll do here in a moment. And then we have the JSON web token, which is the passport strategy. So what we need to do next, I believe, is to actually bring in that authenticate passport, this authenticate token route. We need to bring that into the server. So let's do, in the top here, let's do const authenticate token. Let's see how we exported that. Authenticate. So it's just a normal export. It's not the bracketed export. So we're just going to bring it in as a normal token here, or normal variable, and then require, and then we're going to go out one into strategies and into authenticate. And then to protect an API route for security issues, what you would do is just put that there, and then that's it. That's pretty much it. That will authenticate all requests. Like, so if I hit this register endpoint, I wouldn't want to use that for a register endpoint, but say for a gather user and then by ID, maybe I want that user to be authenticated to make that API request, because maybe I don't want them doing that without permission or without my ability to track it. So that's where this authenticate token comes into play, is it will authenticate the authorization and take that token off. It'll decode it based on our JSON web token, and then it'll pass that request on, and if it's valid or not, basically. And the strategy will basically extract and authenticate our user based on that token. That, let's see, that we create. Oh, right, that we need to do the authentication route. So we need to basically set up one more route to essentially configure all of this, and then we'll be done with the passport. So I'm just going to copy and paste passport. Well, that's not very helpful, but yeah, we need to import passport, and then we need to import a local strategy from passport local, and this is just another npm package. And once again, we have that strategy at the end, so we're just going to branch this off and go like that. And then we need to install this, as well as, I think that should be good. This should be the last package we have to install for now, or for a while. So I'm going to install that, npm run dev, swap back, and then we need to bring in the connection from MongoDB, connection from out one directory into Mongo util, and then we need to, that should be good for now. Okay, so now we need to use passport use, and then we're going to use users is going to be the name of our collection or our strategy that we use. And we need to still set up the schema, I should say. So that's the name of the schema is user. And then new local, new strategy, and then the parentheses, and then brackets. And we're going to do username field. We're going to say email. And then we need to do password field. And if you have VS Code or Visual Studio Code, it'll autocomplete these for you. And then we'll do password. And then pass request to callback, yes. This is very important because we want to get the callback when it comes. So now what we need to do is basically create a callback here with request and email, password, and then last but not least, done. And a fat arrow for the function, and then another opening curly bracket. And then, this is where you would put your logic. So, I'm referencing another example from a project I've used before, but you would just paste in something like this, or utilize whatever you want to use in order to get your, this will authenticate you, but then you want to cross-check that against your own collection, your own user database, because you have your password hashed, right? So that's where I'm decrypting the string here. And I'm checking if the email is equivalent to the user email provided in the callback, and the password is equivalent to my password that is decrypted from the database. So I'm going to go back. So that's done for now. Excuse me. And then, let's move on to schemas. Let me make sure that all this is good. Yeah, it should be good for now. So basically, let me recap. So we have our strategy, our web token that gets extracted here. We have our token that authenticates our users. This will take that token and authenticate our users to make sure they are indeed logged in and who they say they are, basically. And then we have the verification here, checking to see if that logic is correct. All right, this is going to be a kind of lengthy file. There's just one last file we need to do. And so this is going to be a lengthy one, so just bear with me, but it's important. It loops all of this logic back together. So we're going to create a new file in the auth folder called register for the schemas. And then we're going to const mongoose equals require mongoose. And then we also want to bring in const jwt equals JSON web token. And then we want to bring in one more package, passport local mongoose equals require, and then passport local mongoose. I swear this is the last package, I promise. I'm pretty sure this is the last package, because this is the last file that we'll be covering in this tutorial. So let's do npm install, and then run that dev. Okay. And then we need to bring in config for our JSON web token secret down the road here, and then const bcrypt equals, this is an encryption tool, bcrypt. This is the last one, I swear. And then, so we're going to install bcrypt in our terminal in the server, and then run dev. Okay, so we're going to do const new user schema. And what a schema is basically schema will essentially set the format for the way your file, when you use the schema, it sets the folder file, like the format of your data, basically. So it formats the way the data will be saved. That's what I'm trying to say. It basically tells whether it's a string, Boolean, is it required, is it time sensitive, is it date, whatever, right? You got to set all these configuration things through the schema here, and that will dictate how and if your file will save the appropriate data for the first registration. So like in MongoDB, when you create a document, you need to create a document through a schema first by saving the data through the schema, and then down the road, if you want to add more data or modify the data, then you would just use different commands through MongoDB to do that. You would not need a schema. The only time a schema is necessary is if you're saving a file, or sorry, saving data, excuse me, for the first time, say a new user or a new document in your MongoDB, and then you would modify it with MongoDB queries and scripts and stuff like that in order to, appropriately change that data down the road. But for now, what we're doing here is we're basically just creating this new user schema and assigning that to basically a new schema. And we also need to import the schema, so we need to do that. So schema equals mongoose schema. And then we'll just take that off. And what we can actually do here is we can actually just take schema and give that a bracket. Like that. We can deconstruct that. And then, so say I want an ID. So I do brackets, and I do type string, all capital letters for the variable declaration, the type, the data type, and then I'm going to say required true. I think it's required, not require. And then I can just move on to my whatever else I have. So registered date type date required true. I'll do two more for the sake of making it look real. Name type string required true. And then we'll do email type string required true. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to module exports our new user, and then what we're going to do is we're going to do mongoose model, and this is going to basically say, like, hey, take this model and save it as user. And then what we need to do is pass this variable value that we assigned to the schema here into the user. But we're exporting it here, so we're good to go. We're also going to have some. Why do we bring this stuff in? You might be asking. Well, we're going to do some more stuff with the passport here in the schema, so bear with me. It's probably about 20 lines of code. So we're going to take new user schema, and we're going to do pre and then save async, and I'll explain this once we're done. Function, and then we're going to do next, so it proceeds forward. Fat arrow function, or no fat arrow, sorry, just normal. That's the function in itself. Well, I guess what we could do is we could get rid of this and do a fat arrow here. There we go. So we got a function here to keep everything consistent, and then we'll come back to this logic, and then we'll do another new user schema, and then methods generate JWT token. And then we're going to assign this to a fat arrow. So it's going to be a function basically. And then we're going to return JWT sign and then underscore ID. Underscore ID. And then we're going to say this underscore ID. And then also we're going to say email this email. And then we're going to go outside of these curly brackets right here, outside of these curly brackets, and then put a comma, and then do the secret config get, and then the JSON web token secret, so JWT secret. And then we're going to go do one more thing, one more bracket, and then we're going to say expires in, and then we're going to say for 4 hours. Okay, so that's going to create and sign our JSON web token. We need to do one more thing though, well, two more. So we need to take that new user schema, and then we need to do statics, I think, yeah. Validate password, and then async, and then another fat arrow function. So we could do the function and then the inputs right here, but I want to keep to the naming convention of the fat arrows, like best practice essentially is to use fat arrows. So we're going to do input password and then hashed password. those are the values that are going to get passed to this validate password when we use this, or if whenever it gets used. And we're going to return bcrypt, which is that encryption library. And then what we're going to do is we're going to compare the input password to the hash password. And we're done there. And last but not least, we need to do one more thing. New user schema set to, and then you need the quotations there, to lowercase, and then JSON capital. And then we're going to do a bracket here after the comma, and then transform, and then doc ret options for those options, and a fat arrow for a function for a callback. And then we're going to delete ret refresh token, and then return ret. And this is basically everything that you need for your schema, for your registration. So whenever a user registers, this logic will run. You can generate a web token, validate the password, etc., so on and so forth. And this will create a user document or collection in your MongoDB, and it'll be called user. But when it saves, it actually saves with an S, a plural. So it says users in the database. So I usually just save it as user, plural, or singular. But yeah, this is what you need in order to basically to do this properly. And we need to add one more thing here at the bottom. We need to add a plugin, and that plugin is going to be that package that we installed, the Passport local mongoose. And this is basically everything that we have that we need to get this working and this working. So that was a bit in the middleware here. This is like your node mailer stuff. This is like any other additional middleware that you might have. Like node mailer is an email forwarding service or a sending service. Anything like that would go in middleware, but nothing else would really go in strategies or schemas, unless you have more schemas or different things you need to save in your MongoDB. But yeah, so we have our routes here. I showed you how to import those right here. Connected our database. Configure the JSON to be JSON. We can get rid of that. We have our server listening on the port. We authenticate our routes here. We set up all of the strategies that we need, and our registration schema that will save our document in the collection, and and then our config file. So thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. If this was helpful, please subscribe. It means a lot. And I hope I brought some value to your programming journey. Thanks for watching.